So here we have two important pathways that both consume glucose. In a way, it should be kind of intuitive to say, okay, when do you think the body will consume glucose? Usually when you have plenty of glucose in the bloodstream, right? So when does that happen? That happens typically after a meal, within 4 hours after a meal. So this is the first thing I want you to think about, that the consumption of glucose, either by glycogenesis, which is glycogen synthesis, the same as glycogen synthesis, or glycolysis, will occur in a well-fed state. That means your blood glucose is relatively high or close to the high, near 100, 120 milligrams per, or a little more. Okay, so so that's when these glucose consuming processes will occur. There are two other processes involving glucose. Those are, as the subtitle shows, those processes, the function is to restore blood glucose. Restore it as it's dropping back to the normal level. And how do you restore blood glucose? Obviously, you restore blood glucose by producing glucose. So the body switches, if you want, tissues, specific tissues, switch function in a way and start to produce glucose. How do you produce glucose? By breaking down whatever glycogen was stored in the first place. If you break down glycogen, you produce glucose, you release it into the bloodstream, it restores the blood level of glucose in the bloodstream. Glycogenolysis or glycogen degradation. Again, that's a glucose producing pathway. A fourth or a second glucose producing pathway is something called gluconeogenesis. And that simply means the synthesis of glucose, de novo synthesis of glucose from smaller precursors, smaller molecules, making a new molecule of glucose. So one source of glucose is breakdown of glycogen. The other one is by de novo or new glucose synthesis from smaller molecules. Both of these will contribute to restoring blood glucose to its normal level. Okay? So you're intuitively, again, should think, okay, when do we need this? When does the body need to produce glucose? Typically, when you're in a fasting state. And fasting simply means about 5 hours without a meal. Okay, so this is important in the big picture. I remember actually when a student a long time ago, and I think it's a good, came up to me and say, you know, Dr. G, the gluconeogenesis doesn't happen all the time. I said, are you sure? And he said, yeah, it seems like. I said, well, think about when you go to sleep. Doesn't your body need some energy? Doesn't your brain need to function? Don't your muscles need to maintain some tone? Actually, these two processes occur all the time. especially when you are without a meal for a while, for a few hours, and during sleep. Okay? So as you can see, there's a balance between glucose consumption, which usually occurs in a well-fed state, and glucose production, which occurs in a fasting state. Okay? All right, so it's very important that you get the big picture. So
If you like this video, please subscribe. Thank you.